Is real estate, cars, and jobs. Go to where K-Man searches. Go to ektrade.com.
The views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And good evening, K-Man. I'm your host, Austin Harris.
And I'm Ellio Solomon, and welcome to Straight Talk.
The phone lines are open, 745-2626. Or if talking on the phone isn't your thing, you can also comment to us on the WhatsApp number, 928-2562. On WhatsApp, you have two options. You can certainly send us a voice note with your comments and or opinions, as well as sending us a traditional text message vis-a-vis WhatsApp. Whilst we are broadcasting live on your radio dial at the new frequency, 103.1 FM, again, reminding our listening audience that this whole month we will be transitioning away from the old 89.1 to the new frequency of 103.1 FM. And of course, the purpose behind that is to ensure a wider broadcast service to all three Cayman Islands. You can still pick us up on 89.1 for the next month, but after that, 89.1 will be a thing of the past, and 103.1 will be the new radio dial. So we're going to keep reminding you of this, but as soon as you can, make sure you adjust your radio dial programming so that you won't miss a single show. Ellio, I trust you had a wonderful afternoon today.
Yeah, it was one of those busy days, but you're busy but productive. So I had a very good day. And how was yours?
Mine was also very productive, particularly to the listening audience who are viewing us via our live simulcast, which, by the way, we are being brought to you live on 103.1 FM, but also simulcasting live on YouTube and Instagram. At Instagram, you can find us at The Rec Room, and at YouTube, you simply type in the keyword Straight Talk, Talk Show, and there we are. But as those who are tuning in via streaming will see, we added a third camera.
That's right.
To our previous two cameras. So now our guest, who we will introduce in a few moments, will have his own or their own individual camera on them.
We're getting there, Austin.
We are getting there. CNN, look out, baby. CNN, look out.
Yeah.
Before we introduce our guest and the topic of the day, we have two matters of housekeeping. Yesterday, of course, we walked you through the nomination day, and in particular, the persons who were nominated. According to my list, there were 58 candidates, but I missed one. Mm-hmm. There is a 59th candidate, which I will certainly add to our ongoing Excel chart, and that is the Mr. Tyree Hernandez. He's an independent candidate running in the constituency of Georgetown West, taking the total number of candidates for 2025.
In Georgetown West as well?
In Georgetown West, yes.
Oh, my.
In West as well, correct. He said Georgetown West as well because we also have another announcement, also from that constituency, Miss Patricia Bryan. I think we spoke about her a little bit yesterday, particularly in terms of her kinship, if you will.
Right.
But she has made an announcement. I don't know whether it was today or late yesterday evening, but in any event, I found out today that she announced her intention to drop out of the electoral race, having only announcing her intention to run just over a month ago. So Patricia Bryan is out, and she was also previously declared in Georgetown West. So Georgetown West lost one and gained one, according to our list. And that is your complete list now going forward. We have it. And if you have any questions, don't know who is running in your constituency, well, by all means, you can pick up the phone, give us a call, 745-2626, or just shoot us a WhatsApp message, and we'll be happy to point you in the direction of who your candidates are. Yeah. Also, just very quickly, tomorrow is Ash Wednesday.
Correct.
And Cayman Ash Wednesday means Agricultural Pavilion Day.
Yeah.
Let's hope the
weather... A little bit of traffic,
which hopefully will be made a little easier with the grand opening of the east-west arterial all the way into Agricola Drive, I believe it is. Let me pull it up. There was a press release that was issued today by the Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, and Housing. saying they were excited to announce that the highly anticipated east-west bypass from Hearst Road to Agricola Drive will officially open tomorrow, Wednesday, the 5th of March, coinciding with this year's staging of the Cayman Islands Agricultural Show. This new bypass will provide an alternative route to Shamrock Road during this event, so hopefully that'll alleviate some of the traffic.
Right.
I'm also pleased that they're going to be running a shuttle service starting in the areas. I want to say it's in Prospect, but it could be as far back as Tropical Gardens. So you just park and ride, come in, park your car. They'll pick up a shuttle. I think the shuttle is running either every 30 minutes or every hour. So you don't have to be caught in traffic. You can take a leisurely tour all the way to Agricola Drive tomorrow, or you can use the new bypass.
Well, I did see them working on that road, but I didn't realize that's what they were actually doing.
Yes, that's what they are doing. And of course, they're also, there will be special cones set up, particularly on Shamrock Road once you pass I think it's the Christy Tomlinson roundabout heading onto Shamrock Road or Spot Straight proper. Expect some traffic cones, certainly once you get past Spots Newlands Road. You can also expect some specific traffic diversions.
Right.
As they have done in previous years, the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service should be out directing traffic.
A little bit of traffic, but it's all worth it.
It's all worth it. Now, just one bit of notice for members of the public who do choose to drive that road. The Ministry of Planning is advising the public that the road remains an active construction zone with temporary road surfaces in place. So that usually means chip and spray, not paving. So if you're going to take the road, hopefully you're one of those lucky persons who drive an SUV like most people are, those soccer moms in Cayman who have never taken their car off-road, but they'll consider chip and spray off-road. So maybe those, you can, stretch the legs on your old SUV if you want to take that road. But otherwise, it certainly is drivable to any vehicle. But again, warning drivers that it is a construction zone. It's not completed, so you obviously want to drive with caution. But that road opens tomorrow. So that's the bits of news for this evening. And again, I hope the listening audience is well served by it. We are going to bypass the traditional good news. I think the opening of the east-west road, even from Hearst Road to Agricola, is a bit of good news.
Yeah,
and hopefully it'll be open when we resume work on Thursday, so folks coming from the eastern districts will have that option as well, maybe to beat some of the traffic queues a little bit before they run into another bottleneck.
Yeah, that's the one.
But it is our pleasure, Ellio and mine, to welcome in studios our special guest for today. Our guest is Dr. Mark Lockhart. For those of you who may be unaware, Dr. Lockhart is a resident psychiatrist here in the Cayman Islands for over 25 years. He is the longest-serving psychiatrist in the Cayman Islands. He's also the longest-serving member of the National Drug Council. He's the first chairperson of the Mental Health Commission, mover historically behind making the now Poinciana Rehabilitation Facility there in East End a reality. He has been banging that drum for a very long time that we have very little treatment options for persons with mental illness in this country. And certainly, it's good to see that finally coming to fruition.
Didn't even let COVID stop us.
Didn't let COVID stop us.
Yeah.
And we invited Dr. Mark Lockhart because on February 21st, we read an article that was published in the Cayman Compass suggesting that experts warn action is needed to tackle youth mental health crisis. And when we talk about some of the highlights from that article, hopefully you too will agree, as we did, that we were very shocked by those statistics being revealed, and we very clearly needed to get to the bottom of it, some sort of understanding. So with all of that, let me just extend to our guest a very big straight talk welcome to our friend and yours, Dr. Mark Lockhart, sir.
Thank you very much.
Oh, hold on.
Gotcha. Try again.
Try that again.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Austin.
Okay, perfect. I heard him.
I think it's useful to point out, we've been talking about this. We've only been on air in our new format. This is our 4th week. And we were, of course, being a little nostalgic as to whence we come from.
Exactly.
And certainly I think Dr. Mark Lockhart can provide, if for any lack of a better word, a little witness testimony that he was there when we were, 15 years ago somewhere else.
Yes, sir. If I can remember, I think I was like your second or third guest.
Mm-hmm. That's almost accurate here again.
Yes, right.
And I was on you guys with you maybe 4 or 5 times throughout the years.
Yes.
And you've always been very thorough with your questions and your desire to find the right information and get solutions. So it's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here with you.
Yes.
Well, let me highlight the fact that you've actually can give testimony to the fact that you were with us about 15 years ago is also evidence and proof that you've been in this country for a long time.
Yes, sir.
And you've made a wonderful contribution for those persons who may be unaware of you, and we thank you for that.
Well, this is my country. This is my country.
I love to hear that.
Yes, no,
This is my country. These are my people, and this is where I've given everything that I have.
Awesome.
Yes, and it has been a fantastic contribution, and it is not over yet. And we're going to certainly take advantage of that expertise today, because Dr. Lockhart, as we stated, when this article was published and we both read it, I mean, this is one of those conversations that kind of hits you deep and go, really? This is going on in my country?
Yes.
Really? So just a few key points that were contained in that article, again, that was published in the Cayman Compass on the 21st of February this year. It said, according to a major survey, of the 3,339 school children from years 6 to 12, were found that 529 of them, or 15% of that number, had suicidal thoughts, and an even more troubling 247, or 7.4%, had actually tried to take their lives. I mean, I get choked up just saying it.
Yeah.
It went on to add that a quarter of the youngsters aged 9 to 13 who took part in the National Drug Council survey said they had considered suicide, and 1 in 4 had actually, carried out self-harm on themselves in one form or the other. In revealing those statistics from that very casual survey, I would call it as such, certainly wasn't a national survey, but a casual survey, but it shows that Cayman has a 2% higher rate for diagnosis of anxiety among young people compared to global statistics. Globally, it stands at about 1.1% of the global population. In the Cayman Islands, our number is up to 4.6%, which is also incredibly shocking and, leaves us puzzled as perhaps laymen on this subject to understand where this is all coming from. A number of the youngsters seeking help had increased massively compared to previous years, according to the survey. Some 5% had sought treatment in 2018 and 4.4% in 2020, when, of course, COVID disrupted normal life. But that figure had risen overall by some 33% in the latest survey that was conducted last year. So some massive numbers here. A significant number of our young people have been obviously affected by this, are being affected by this.
Yes.
And it just really burdens the question, where did these feelings, these situations of mental distress, where do they come from? And it just seems hard to fathom. But when we look at our schools, whether public or private, they seem like good institutions for learning. They all share similar morals and values, ethical standards, but yet a significant number of our young people are dealing with some very clear mental distressful thoughts or feelings or otherwise. So, Dr. Lockhart, should we be shocked by these numbers?
Well, I want us to be shocked because we're talking about our children. We're talking about our future.
Yes.
And I don't take those words lightly or to throw that around as just some epitaph.
Mm-hmm.
Mental health and mental illness should not be an afterthought, especially when we're talking about the young.
Yes.
Their mental health is the foundation of their future.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about, and the two of you know very well as former political leaders and community leaders, which you still are, that our future really are young people.
Mm-hmm.
So when we hear and see these types of statistics, we have to really react and take it very seriously.
Yes.
Now, a few things to give a little background. 50% of mental illness originates before a human being is age 14.
Really?
75% of mental illness diagnoses have a confirmation in behavior and traits by age 25. Am I saying that they're necessarily diagnosed or saw a professional? No. But retrospective studies, analysis of information that we have universally point out that mental disorders are primarily, their origin primarily is in the young.
Right.
That's when it starts. Even if somebody's 45 years old when they're first diagnosed, when we look at the history and so on,
The signs were there.
the signs were there, whether they were picked up on or not, but they were there.
And in those 50%, I'm just curious, are the majority of those persons experiencing mental health issues hereditary, or is it societal?
And so that brings up, that's an excellent question, and brings up the next point, is that there are multifactorial reasons. So there's a genetic predisposition, there's social causes and contributants, there are family type or systems contributants, and then there are personality features.
Right.
We are now realizing over the last 20 years, 25 years or so, that the social component plays a much larger role than we first even thought. And that brings us to an understanding and certain studies that have been done about adverse childhood experiences, it's called. And there actually been a lot of research and information into assessing and characterizing what are adverse childhood experiences. So many times when we hear that term, we think of sexual abuse, serious physical and emotional neglect, which are underneath that umbrella. But things like divorce, separation of families, having a parent in a household that has a mental health illness or a substance abuse illness, having a parent that's incarcerated, are all considered adverse childhood experiences and can potentially lead to serious mental health consequences. We also know that the more of these types of adverse experiences a young person has, it incrementally increases the risk of them having mental health issues later on in life.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that because, you know, when Austin and I read it, it first of all caused me to reflect on my childhood. And I remember just, you know, excited about life, coming out there with summer vacation, two 5-gallon buckets full of mangoes and going to the beach. And some of the things that as I was trying to search my mind as to what was causing this, is I said, well, first of all, I don't necessarily know that a lot of youngsters have the same level of physical activity, maybe the same level of friends. I was concerned about, well, what's really happening in the homes? You know, are they stressed? Maybe they're hearing their parents arguing. There's bills that needs to be paid. And you seem to be pointing in that direction when you talk about adverse.
100%. So first of all, we know that 6 out of 10 marriages today end in divorce. So interestingly enough, these studies here showed that we did an ACE survey here among our students, and the largest area in terms of percentage of response was the family separation. Again, which it led to emotional type consequences. We are at an interesting crossroads in the world right now, where a lot of studies and anecdotal information is pointing that the younger generations, and not just here in Cayman, but in other places, but it is also prevalent here in Cayman, are saying that they don't have the hope for the future that we had. So if we go back, we being, let's call it those of us between, let's say, 35 and 55. It's a common thing growing up that our family members, our parents, our grandparents said that you're going to have a better life than us. We're going to sacrifice and make sure that Ellio and Austin get and do and achieve things that we weren't able to achieve.
Correct. Yeah.
And we also believe that. We now have a generation of young people that feel that my life isn't going to be as good as my parents. I don't know if I'm going to ever own a home,
Yes.
my own house. I'll be lucky if I can rent an apartment. I don't know if I can even actually stay in my own homeland. I may have to leave and go somewhere else. So the social change that we're seeing, and it's very prominent here. It's prominent in other jurisdictions and they're making changes, but it is very prominent here when we look and we put everything together socially. The rapid growth of our population over the last 20, 30 years.
Right.
What we're seeing with traffic. Austin, you just announced opening up a new part of East-West Arterial.
Yes.
And all of that is because of our population growth.
That's right. It's a symptom of our population.
It's a symptom.
Yes.
And so what I am proposing is that one of the symptoms we're seeing also is the impact on the mental health of our young people.
Yes.
But see, again, interesting you're saying that. I was having a discussion as I was heading east a couple of days ago with two of my workers. These were younger men. And again, thinking and contemplating on the same issue, I said, I think a lot of times younger persons are probably even hearing in the homes, overhearing discussions where the parents would be saying, oh, this country's gone. I mean, these sort of statements, and there's absolutely no opportunity. And they're overhearing these things.
100%.
And that was not, to your point, the kind of conversation I would have heard when I was a kid.
Right.
I would have probably heard precisely what you said, which is, boy, we suffered, but Honor got it better than us.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Indeed. Now, we talked about societal implications as to perhaps being some of the origins behind this mental health crisis amongst our young people. If we can look specifically at your previous role in the National Drug Council, because whilst this survey was alarming to both my colleague and I, something that perhaps we've become desensitized to but should not be surprised at is the rate of drug use amongst our young people. If we look back, I think at the Cayman Islands Student Drug Use Survey 2022 revealed that children as young as 9 years old are experimenting with different substances. Marijuana tops the list on the illicit drug side, and perhaps even more alarming, they even provided the statistics that the average age of a child experiencing their first drink is at the age of 11 years old. So 9, 11 years old, kids are being exposed to things that, to my colleague's point, as we old people are, a lot sooner than we were. What is the correlation between drugs and alcohol and mental health illness?
So it's a major correlation, especially with severe mental illness. So when we're talking about mental illness, we're really talking about a very broad spectrum of disorders, all the way from mild phobia or fears. So you have some people that they might have a fear of flying.
Right.
And when they have to go to the airport to go overseas or so on, they might have to take a little med or so. Their nerves are a little bit shaken. Once they get off that flight, they function very well.
Right.
That would meet criteria for a mental health disorder, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But that's very mild.
Yeah.
All the way to somebody who's a schizophrenic, who cannot function or take care of themselves. So that's another part we'll talk about a little later, in that we have to also recognize that mental health and mental health type issues are complex, in the same way that we talk about other medical diagnoses and issues. We don't put cancer, heart disease, and let's say, diseases of the immunity or something in the same boat.
Right.
There's separations, there are different specialties, and so on. What happens many times is, because of the still residual stigma with mental health, we view all mental health conditions as the same. So when we're talking about those serious mental health conditions, substances are a major component. And there are several components to that. One of it, there's a self-medicating hypothesis. Because of the stigma, the lack of ability of resources and treatment, many people turn to substances that are easily available to medicate, to calm themselves, to escape. We also, and I don't want to put everything down to our social growth and expansion, but there's also the internet and social media, which has opened, it's like an open portal in a sense to the world. And our children access that through their phones and with their friends and so on. And the information that they are available to receive and to interact with comes with lots of consequences.
And there's access to a lot of things we didn't have access to.
Exactly,
as
not
kids as
even
well.
close.
So when you talk about the spectrum, I mean, back to the specifics of this article where we're talking about suicide, I imagine that's on the extreme side of it.
Yeah, so unfortunately, suicide is the most terrible outcome of severe mental illness, and people don't complete suicide or attempt suicide just for fun or just because they're stressed or they're overwhelmed, contrary to popular belief. 9 out of 10 times it's because the person has a mental health challenge. It's usually depression or extreme severe anxiety, or in some cases, schizophrenia.
Doc, if I can ask you to stick a pin there, we do have to pause, go off to our top of the hour news brought to you by the BBC. But we do have Dr. Mark Lockhart with us in studios, and we're tackling the issue of the startling numbers of mental health amongst our young people. Keep it locked. Straight Talk will return right here on Bobo FM.
Bobo FM. We're making Bobo FM bigger and better. We've got a brand new frequency with even more power. Retune your FM radio to 103.1 now. This is Bobo FM, the home of the BBC World Service, the most trusted news source in the world. Now in our new home of 103.1 FM. This is Bobo 103.1.
The BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
The BBC World Service makes programs with a uniquely global perspective.
Enlighten us. Where do we start?
The latest world news and current affairs.
The very best in global arts and culture.
What has been happening on the financial markets today.
Social issues, political stories.
Everything was there in a way that I never heard before.
The BBC World Service.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM. Bobo FM. We're making Bobo FM bigger and better. We've got a brand new frequency with even more power. Retune your FM radio to 103.1 now. This is Bobo FM, the home of the BBC World Service, the most trusted news source in the world. Now in our new home of 103.1 FM. This is Bobo 103.1.
For business, they say location, location, location. But really, there's no better location than right here, right now on your mobile phone or laptop. Buy and sell your pre-owned gear where the island is searching online. Buy and sell on ektrade.com. That's ektrade.com.
Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. Powered by Health Services Authority, the home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
I'm Stuart McIntosh with the BBC News. Hello. President Zelensky of Ukraine has tried to repair relations with Donald Trump, saying he's ready to work under his leadership to achieve lasting peace with Russia. It comes hours after the suspension of military aid to Ukraine. Mr. Zelensky said he was prepared to sign a minerals deal with Washington. Our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, says he's not just reacting to US pressure.
I think that in that meeting they had in London at the weekend, one of the messages coming to him was, you've got to make it up with Trump. You've got to make it up with the Americans. You need them, we need them, we all need them. We may find it difficult to deal with this man, but it's a necessity. I thought the most interesting part of it all, at the very end, he still talked about security agreements. And President Trump has said that this minerals mining agreement, the presence of American investment, is all the security guarantee you might ever need.
Reacting to President Zelensky's comments, Britain's Prime Minister welcomed what he called the Ukrainian leader's steadfast commitment to securing peace. Keir Starmer stressed that any peace for Ukraine needed to be lasting and secure. The French presidency has expressed similar sentiments. Canada's Prime Minister has condemned Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian imports, saying this was a very dumb thing to do and accusing the US president of seeking to collapse Canada's economy to annex it. At a news conference, Justin Trudeau had this message for the Americans.
Your government has chosen to do this to you. Markets are down, and inflation is set to rise dramatically all across your country. Your government has chosen to put American jobs at risk, at the thousands of workplaces that succeed because of materials from Canada or because of consumers in Canada, or both.
Arab leaders have approved an Egyptian plan that counters President Trump's suggestion of taking over the Gaza Strip and evicting its Palestinian inhabitants. Closing an emergency summit in Cairo on Gaza's reconstruction, Egypt's President Sisi said the plan would also ensure Palestinians remain on their land. Lise Doucette is in Cairo.
The Arab states say they can rebuild Gaza in 5 years, not in the 10 to 15-year span President Trump has spoken about. And most important of all, they say it can be done without displacing more than 2 million Palestinians. Their three-phase plan involves the Palestinians living in temporary containers. And all the while, Gaza would be run by a technocratic committee, something which would be overseen by the Palestinian Authority.
Hamas welcomed the plan, but Israel criticised the summit for not condemning Hamas. World News from the BBC. At least 12 civilians, including children, have been killed in a militant attack in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in northwest Pakistan. The authorities say 30 people have been injured. Police said suicide bombers rammed 2 cars laden with explosives into the Banu military compound. Some people died as parts of nearby buildings, including a mosque, collapsed. An advisor to the chief minister said all the attackers were killed. The United Nations has warned that about 1 million people in Somalia are at risk of crisis levels of hunger in the coming months due to poor rainfall expected between April and June. The World Food Programme says drought conditions may worsen after 2 failed rainy seasons. Jean-Martin Bauer from the WFP says cereal crops have been badly affected.
In 2024 in Somalia, they were 45% below the long-term average in both cases. And now we're looking at a poor weather forecast. The different weather models we look at are telling us that there's going to be drought in the next crop cycle, which is going to be the GOOP cycle in April to June 2025. That could exacerbate the situation I've just mentioned.
Excuse me. Norway says it'll extradite a man wanted by Rwanda for his alleged role in the 1994 genocide. The unidentified suspect, arrested 3 years ago, will stand trial for murder. Norway's Justice Ministry approved the extradition last month, citing its obligations under the UN Genocide Convention. A French organisation that aims to conserve historic heritage has launched a fundraising campaign offering people the chance of winning a piece of Notre Dame. 50 limestone cubes, each measuring 7 centimetres by 7 centimetres and weighing nearly 800 grams, will be awarded to winners drawn at random in April. These cubes come from the rubble of the cathedral that nearly burned down in 2019 and are too damaged to be used again. BBC News.
The views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And welcome back, K-Man. I'm your host, Austin Harris.
And I'm Ellio Solomon.
And welcome back to more Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM, being brought to you live on your radio dial, but also simulcast on YouTube and on Instagram. On Instagram, you can check us out via the Rec Room 345. The phone lines are open at 745-2626, or you can share your thoughts, comments, and questions with us via WhatsApp by dialing 928-2562. Our guest in studios, for those of you just tuning in, is none other than Dr. Mark Lockhart, the resident psychiatrist in the Cayman Islands for over 25 years, and arguably probably the best person to engage in a conversation as it relates to today's troubling youth mental health issues. The numbers of our young people who have either considered or may even have tried, expressed suicidal thoughts, expressed suicidal harm on themselves, or other mental health concerns here in the Cayman Islands. So welcome back. Certainly, Ellio, you were dealing with the issue of one of the consequences that come with mental health, and that, of course, is the alarming rate of suicide.
Yeah, so I just to start back where we left off, it was on the issue of, to the specifics of this article, where it's talking about individuals or kids particularly who have done some sort of self-harm or have suicidal thoughts. I think you pointed away from that, but a lot of persons listening would probably have said, well, I mean, these kids are just under a lot of stress. And you seem to be suggesting that, one, this is an extreme side of the spectrum, but it's not just stress. Tell us exactly what's happening.
Correct. So while stress can be a factor in exacerbating the underlying reactions, it's not just the cause of stress. So first of all, to put in perspective, suicide has always been on the table as an unfortunate consequence of mental challenges in young people. So suicide in the age groups of 24 and below are in the top 3 and 4 reasons of death in most jurisdictions in the world for young people. So if we think of it, after trauma, car accidents, motorcycle accidents, and severe illness like cancer, suicide is the leading cause for young people in terms of them dying, unfortunately. Now,
so tell us what can families do? What can parents do?
Well, so excellent question. So we've always heard that the big thing is, talk to your children, and which is what we've always said, meaning keeping the communication open with your children. We're now realizing and becoming more nuanced with that recommendation that it is more about listening to your children.
Right.
And I like to use a term that I'd learned like 35 years ago, 40 years ago in training, which is learning to listen with the third ear. So it's actually an old therapy term from an old psychoanalyst that said that we can listen, but then we can listen more keenly with a third ear. And what do I mean by that? Many times you're talking, or your kids or you're interacting, and we're doing something else, and we're listening, go ahead, and so on. We're not fully there. So basically what we're saying is that when we interact with our children, we need to talk with them, but we need to listen twice or 3 times more than we're talking, and observe. And so we're listening and observing not just what they say, but what they're not saying and how they're saying it.
Right. Reading between the lines.
Reading between the lines. And we need to develop that tool even more so and sharpen that tool as a parent. Because remember, the information that our young people are receiving is coming from multiple angles, and it's almost 24 hours a day with this advent of the telephone.
Yes, yes. But when dealing with young people, though, how do you even begin to have that conversation? I mean, you come out with being direct, or I mean, because it is such a sensitive topic that really I would imagine a lot of parents are just sort of clueless as to even how to begin that conversation.
Excellent question, and that brings up an old adage which is very wrong, where many parents feel that if I bring up something like suicide with my child, I'm going to be planting the idea in their mind. That is completely false. That has been completely obliterated with studies and assessments throughout the years in many different realms, that it actually serves the opposite. Talking to them about feeling overwhelmed, or have you ever had thoughts of maybe not being here or being around, have you ever felt like that, or tell me about that, will not plant the idea in their mind. So to be clear, I'm not saying you go and necessarily have to use the big S word. You don't need to see and plan and say, have you thought about doing X or Y or taking this or doing that? You're not No.
It's more gentle ways of bringing it across.
It's just saying, you know, sometimes I know that life can be hard, even for dad, even for mom. Sometimes you see us struggling with certain things, but, you know, we fight on or so on. Have you ever thought, I see sometimes in school, or I know that you're having a tough time not making the team or not doing this or that, or have you ever felt like you wanted to give up, or how you
want to run away from it all?
You want to run away from it all? There you go, and use terms like that. That's very important. To Austin's point, you're not going to stop them from playing their video game and unplug the Xbox and sit down and start talking like that. They're not going to engage in that.
Right.
So generally we find is that you want to find times like when you're driving them to school, when you're picking them up from school, when you're taking them to certain kind of activities. You start out by just asking how you're doing, talking to them, trying to develop a type of a rapport, knowing who their friends are, knowing why they choose certain friends as best as you can. So why, I noticed that you and Jimmy are real close friends. Tell me 2 things positive or that you like about Jimmy or Jane. Or,
Right.
Just ways like that. That can give you an insight into
their way of thinking.
Their way of thinking and their personality. So really what I'm saying is that we have to be more of a detective in this day and age as parents.
Indeed.
Much more so than even before.
No, absolutely. Thought parenting was hard before, but now
it is harder.
You just had to step it up. Yeah. Now, we talked about the factors that may contribute to mental health. And again, we use some of it is inherited. A lot of it is societal. We talk about the correlation between young persons' drug use when they, first begin to experiment with drugs. And alcohol is a drug. It falls in that category. But also some of the more illicit ones. Again, prior to the break, we talked about the, average age of drinking in the Cayman Islands being 11 years old, whilst the average age of trying illicit drugs like marijuana is 9 years old. Troubling statistics.
Yeah.
But let me add to it, because 2024 seemed to be the year where healthcare found itself under the microscope, not least of which mental health, and of course the challenges and pitfalls of getting the Poinciana Mental Health Facility, into a reality, which we'll hopefully touch on in a little bit. But in October last year, October 17th to the 19th in particular, the Cayman Islands hosted the healthcare conference, at which time the chief medical officer, Dr. Nick Gent, revealed another startling number, that as much as 50% of the Caymanian population, or 50% of Caymanians specifically, are suffering with multiple high-risk factors of either non-communicable diseases or chronic illness, which is a significant number. But he went on to warn that number of 50% could be actually higher, because he believes the rate of persons with chronic or non-communicable illnesses in this country largely go undiagnosed. And he went on to make a very strong remark, which was somewhat surprising coming from someone in healthcare, but I appreciated it because it was honest. He said, and I quote, "The cost or fear of the cost of healthcare is now a major barrier to many people from seeking to get either wellness or regular health checks." So my question to you in a long-winded way is, whilst we look at the role of the parent, while we look at the role of healthcare, should we also be asking more of our health insurance providers to ensure that there is adequate coverage to ensure proper wellness and otherwise health checks at all ages?
100%. So I first let me echo what Dr. Gent, my colleague, said, and support it 100% in terms of what he said. And I can also go on to say that it mirrors what is happening in mental health. The same Cayman Islands student drug surveys through the National Drug Council also highlight that, and this is with over 3,000 students from all our high schools, including Cayman Brac, that the majority of them with mental health issues have not sought treatment. And they even say that in that study. So we know that the majority of people with mental health challenges, and some of them serious challenges, do not seek help. And there are many reasons. Partly there's the stigma, but just as Dr. Gent identified, there are challenges with the rapid growth and the disconnect between the rich and poor, that people feel that I don't have the money. My insurance doesn't cover for me to get the care or to buy the medications or the treatment that I may need. Number two, in a small community, I've seen people say that I'm also concerned that when I do seek the treatment and I embrace the treatment and I start to do better, if an employer finds out about that, I am not going to be employable, especially in the type of work that I do in this community. So that's where we fight, and that's why I come on shows like this to say that, look, let's, you know, we have to normalize and realize that just using the term mental illness does not mean that the person cannot function or is a danger or is a threat.
Yeah. As I hear you talking about that, I mean, in talking specifically about insurance, it seems almost like as a community we need to do more, right? Because you can see, as you've said, persons who have it might not want to come forward for a myriad of different reasons, the taboo from society, cuckoo, those sort of things. Yeah. And, you know, again, persons saying, I'm going to lose my job. And you might have a situation where even persons who do have that mental is probably finding it difficult to hold down a job.
Correct.
Right? And so it seems like it might be something different that we're going to have to be looking at in terms of policies for persons who are mentally ill. What do you say?
Yes, so I agree 100%, and I have a major concern. We are going to need governmental commitment, but not the old-time government commitment. We're not saying go to the members of parliament and ask for more money necessarily, because we see that. We see, I forgot what the number is in parliament, what the...
19? 19 members of parliament?
No, the number for the that bill where you say, like, for the extended coverage for services every year, it's 50 million. Another this for the tertiary. And
yes.
Right.
Yes.
Supplementary.
Right. So here's an issue now. For example, many of us have fought hard to get that Ponciana facility open. Mm-hmm. That facility has 54 beds, 54. We have 11 beds at the Georgetown Hospital. So that is, what, 65 beds, right? For a population of, call it, approaching 100,000. Mm-hmm. In the United States right now as we speak, most states, the average number of beds is about 11 beds per 100,000 people. So there are a handful of states in the United States that have the number of beds per population that we have. It is recommended by the World Health Organization and other groups of psychiatrists and psychologists worldwide that the ideal number of beds should be anywhere between 30 and 60 psychiatric beds per 100,000. Mm-hmm. We're right at 65 as we speak today.
Right. And how many do we have at the facility?
54.
54 beds.
We're probably using about 6 or 7 of them right now as we speak, because it opened in December.
Right.
They're still having teething pains in terms of staffing and getting things up to date.
Yeah.
Why am I bringing this up? Because we're still sending people overseas. Yeah. We are sending people to Miami, to Florida, finding places. Cineco is still sending people for treatment overseas that can be obtained here. We're not building a rocket to go up to
Mars.
to Mars.
Right.
And even that has been done.
We can manage it here. That's millions of dollars we can save. And these are conversations that I've actually had with Cineco and the insurance carriers that are saying we can start there to funnel the proper amount of resources required into Ponciana to bring it up to standard. Mm-hmm. So that we do not have to be sending so many people overseas.
Deal with our own issues.
And deal with our own issues. And we're now in a world where I think it's being very clear that everybody's saying they want to manage their own thing. Yeah. And you deal with your own things on your own.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is one area I feel that we can really maximize to start right away. It doesn't require us asking insurance companies to change anything. It's just to say, right now, after the election, whoever the new government takes power, they can start right away to say, let us look at where things are, how many people we're sending overseas, what is required to finish fitting out Ponciana and bringing it up to where it really needs to be. Because that hits the other point, Ellio, in that it is not a facility designed to warehouse people.
Mm-hmm.
The design of that facility, which was painstakingly done by a wide cross-section of stakeholders, all aspects of our society, was to develop our own Caymanian-style residence in a tranquil environment to help to really rehabilitate, prepare people, give them the life skills, the social skills, along with the medical care, to be able to take back their life, take control, come back out into the community and be productive members.
Yeah.
It will help to break down that stigma.
Right.
If we see in a year from now that, wait a minute, you can do a show out there at Ponciana and see the artwork that's being done. In the same way that we can go to the agricultural fair tomorrow, we might get to a point where there's going to be a tent at the agricultural fair of the residents of Ponciana in terms of their artwork, in terms of things that they're growing and doing. That will start to break down the stigma.
Yeah.
People say, well, oh, but this person was ill with this or this person had that, but look at how well they're doing and so on. It's going to take a generation, but we have to start.
Right. Now, we talked about the Ponciana mental health facility. I want to make sure I get the nomenclature correct. That's why the pregnant pause was there. But we talk about, in the first instance, that is, it was intended as a clinical institution. But it has also been tossed around that in addition to providing clinical services to specifically persons with mental health issues, it has been said from the courts down to perhaps the man on the street that there are persons who have been guilty of criminal offenses by reason of mental illness, and sending them to Northward is not the place for them, and therefore the suggestion was that these are persons who could otherwise be redeemed, assisted, or otherwise by being housed in the mental health facility. What are your thoughts on the provision of services, one, from a clinical aspect, but on the other side, from an incarceration aspect? Because I don't think the facility is, by any stretch of the imagination, meant to house, persons with either violent intent or criminal intent. But I leave that to you to tell us.
Excellent. So this brings up another one of the major misconceptions from day one with the facility. It's fascinating how memory is, because if we go back 6-7 years ago, I remember going out to East End with the chief officer at the time and a group of delegation to talk to the community in East End. There was a different member of parliament for East End at that point. And there was concern from the population at East End that, wait a minute, you're going to be building this mental health facility out here. Is it going to put our people at risk and put people in danger having these types of people here? How do we know that people won't be violent and so on?
Right.
And I explained, number one, there is a very minuscule number of patients or people with serious mental illness who are violent. It's a very small percentage. The majority of people with mental illness are actually victims and are victimized by others who take advantage of them, take money from them, beat them, abuse them. The largest number of the mentally ill in the United States, for example, are homeless. The second largest number in prison. The largest institution in the Cayman Islands that houses people with diagnosed mental illness or mental diagnosis is our prison system. So the numbers of patients right now at Northward and Fairbanks are larger than the number of people we currently have at Ponciana or in the hospital.
Wow. And if taken together, I mean, we talked about having 54 beds available now, 6 of which you believe are already in usage. if we were to accept or take on those in the criminal justice system, how many would that be?
Well, so now let me explain this. So now this is where it gets a little confusing. And this is where I'd said earlier, we need to separate. We need to start breaking down that concept of mental health and mental illness. Okay. In the same way that we break down the concept of a medical illness. So if we three of us drive to the hospital right now, the first place we're going to go is either urgent care or we go into the emergency room.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because you need to be assessed to see what is actually happening, get some blood work, then you're triaged.
The triage system, yeah.
If you're very ill, you need to go up to the intensive care unit. They don't just put you on the pediatric unit.
Right.
If you need a surgical procedure, you go to the surgical ward. You don't go to the labor and delivery. So let's draw back now to mental illness. The Ponciana Rehabilitation Facility is designed to treat adult patients with mental illness, moderate to severe mental illness, requiring an extended period of time for rehabilitation. Mm. It is not a forensic institution. So what does that mean? A forensic institution are hospital/jails, where so it's a hospital, hybrid hospital system with a correctional component that's designed to treat people with severe mental illness that have violent tendencies or have been convicted of a crime. Mm-hmm. Those types of facilities are kept in prisons, within a prison setting or next to a prison setting, or standalone hybrid prison-type hospital settings. Gotcha. There are several in the UK, several in the United States, and so on. You wouldn't put a 12-year-old child in there.
Correct. I see.
You would not put somebody with an anxiety disorder or something in that setting. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It gets a little bit more confusing now in that we also have had some cases, one in particular that was in the media, of a young man that was found not guilty by reason of insanity. Mm-hmm. I repeat, he was found not guilty
right.
by reason of insanity, that he had a mental condition that was so severe, it impaired his ability to know the difference between right and wrong. And the judge found that he was not guilty of the offense, but he was not guilty because he was mentally ill.
Right. So he couldn't be returned to regular society.
He couldn't be returned to regular society, and at the same time, he can't be sent to Northward because he's not convicted.
Right.
And we had nowhere in the law. The law was an archaic component of the law which said that, and I'm paraphrasing, if you're found not guilty by reason of insanity, you're to be transported to the hospital and to a mental hospital. If there's no such thing, then the hospital, the general hospital, and the ward there that will treat, and so on. So this gentleman was brought to the hospital in September of 2020. We're now in March of 2025, and he's still living on that unit with a 12-year-old patient. We have several 16-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 20-year-olds with this person living there.
Well, I think you've ended up in a spot where I kind of really wanted to go. And again, I started talking about are we doing enough? You know, is it a situation where publicly we need to get more involved? My colleague and I have had some good discussions, for example, even on the latest sexual harassment legislation.
Yes, sir.
So it seems like we're not up to speed when it comes to mental health.
We're not.
I mean, for example, sexual harassment. They have something specific where every company has to have a policy on sexual harassment. Does every company have to have a policy on mental health?
Excellent point.
And again, you're talking about a lacuna right now that's existing in relation to this gentleman.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
So now let's go back to Ponciana. So I heard the discussion that, well, there's some concern about those that have been charged with a criminal offense that have a mental health component and they are awaiting trial, and those that have been convicted of a criminal offense and have a mental condition. that we are having difficulty in terms of housing them at Northwood and Fairbanks, and maybe the Ponciana mental health facility would be a good, no, it would not. Okay. That goes completely against any type of treatment paradigm. And I gave an example at a recent talk, and I said, if we were sitting here now talking about education, and the issue was, well, the population is growing. We don't have enough spaces for children entering the school system, for your 4-year-old, 5-year-olds, and so on. But you know what? We have a lovely new high school. And there's a part there in the back of the gym or something that we could kind of fence off. Mm-hmm. We could put some 6-year-olds there with the 16-year-olds, and we'd just fence it between. Maybe we'd have them play at a certain time, and then when the older kids are out, the younger ones will be inside, and it's a beautiful new high school. We could just split it up.
Right.
And put all the ages there. Let's go back to 100 years ago.
Indeed.
And just have an all-age school.
I think you've been making the point that such a recommendation would seem completely nonsensical to even the average person, but yet we still want to apply that thinking
to mental health.
To mental health.
And again, I'm not attacking anyone.
Sure.
But I am not going to be shy as the person that has this knowledge.
No, please
You
don't.
cannot do that.
But let me ask the question, because in a perfect world, to your analogy,
right,
persons who are incarcerated, they have a mental health illness
right,
that is in addition to perhaps violent tendencies or otherwise. So therefore, the place for them to be housed would be in a prison or jail type of setting, which is why you said persons who are that have a mental illness would remain on the footprint of what would be, in this case, a Fairbanks or a Northwood, but in a separate medical wing, if you will, that, you know, the facility has the fencing and adequate security to prevent that person from being a harm to the community. But at the same time, they're not part of the general population because their issue is mental and not entirely a criminal conduct.
There you are, sir. That's the solution.
Yeah.
Now, there's another little nuance to it, to be clear, because the other side, somebody would say, but come on. So are you saying then that Ponciana cannot, because I've heard judges also say this, that it's so unfortunate, you know, we would love to be able to send X or Y person to Ponciana, but we hear that if you've had a criminal record or conviction, you can't go there. That is also not the case. As I said earlier, up to 50%, some studies even say it's higher, 60% of those with serious mental illness, things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, especially when it's untreated, use substances.
Yes.
Use drugs.
Yeah, they're self-medicating.
They're self-medicating.
Yeah.
Many times they're arrested. I've seen many young people arrested many times for cannabis possession, and so forth. They've gone to Northwood, spent weeks at a time, come out, and so on.
Yeah.
They're no threat to anyone.
Yeah.
They're not violent in any way. Of course that person can be assessed. We have risk assessment instruments that we use all the time that we can assess. Has this person ever committed any violent act? Do they have a problem with rage and temper? What type of drugs do they use? And so on. There's a lot of process of assessing the potential risk to say then this person would be suitable to go up to Ponciana even with a quote-unquote criminal history.
Right.
But Y person would not, because that person has had 2 stabbings in their past. They've had GBH charges in the past and so on, that they would be a danger.
Yeah.
So we need to develop a forensic wing, a forensic unit as part of the prison system for those that have been convicted but have a mental health issue, or those that are awaiting trial while they're there. For those that have been found not guilty by reason of insanity, they should be assessed with risk assessment instruments to see if they are able to be housed at Ponciana. And many will.
Right.
And the proof is the same young man who we can Google, because I'm not going to use his name, but it's in public domain.
I read it. Yeah.
He's living on a unit right now in the hospital with 12-year-old teenagers. He's been there for 5 years.
Well, that was my point that I wanted to make. In a perfect world, we would have a separate residential facility on the premises of our incarceration facilities, Northwood or Fairbanks.
Correct.
But given the fact that it has taken this country so long to develop a mental health facility, a purpose-built one, that perhaps until we live in that perfect world where the priorities of our leaders, are in line with perhaps what the medical community is suggesting, can the Poinciana Rehabilitation Facility serve these two masters, at least in the short term?
So I think it can, but we need to make sure that we involve those that are aware of the functioning of the system. So stakeholders, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, those that are treating, we need to have the proper input.
Right.
We can't just have lawyers or correctional people make statements without getting the medical information and background.
Agreed.
I'm curious when you talk about the forensic unit. I mean, is this something that has been made and put forward as a formal recommendation? Is there?
So I've been here a long time, and I remember going with a gentleman named Anthony Eden, who was Minister of Health.
Remember that?
And we went to Fairbanks area, and we were looking at an area there, and I walked with the minister at that time. This was 20-something years ago, as a potential option for a forensic-type facility. So this has been debated and discussed, tabled, put aside over time.
Another thing on the shelf.
Exactly. But this is something that needs to be done. And I know that there is a talk about a new prison, which is badly needed.
Yes.
And I think this would be part of that discussion. That should be included in that there would be a wing or a component. I know that there's some differences among some of the medical practitioners where I feel that it would be best within the prison compound. I've had some colleagues that say that it should stand alone near it or something, whatever. But it cannot be incorporated into Poinciana.
Right.
But Poinciana will certainly be able to accept people that have had a quote-unquote criminal or arrest history once they're assessed for their level of risk and their ability to comply with treatment and integrate in that.
I wonder if you're able to share with us, persons who are listening, because I'm concerned about when we talked about insurance and, again, persons in the workplace. Are there things that people can and look for in terms of their colleagues, and how should we try to respond to this? What do you suggest? What do you recommend?
Yeah, so...
challenging.
It is it's a very challenging question, and mental health in the workplace is a major challenge. And I understand it on both sides. I'm not going to just sit here and beat up the employers. I've seen the complex nuances. You have a business to run. You need people to show up and to do their job. You've hired somebody. Unfortunately, what happens here in the Cayman Islands, and we've seen it, I've seen this dozens of times, and I'm just trying to be humble and not say hundreds, but it's probably close.
Sure.
Of people coming on a work permit, and very shortly after coming, they decompensate and they're hospitalized.
Right.
Did they put on their work permit that they had a history of serious mental illness or something? Absolutely not.
Sure.
And then what happens to the employer? So the employer then feels like, I've spent this money on a permit, I have expected this person to come and work, they can't function.
It sounds like it's totally not fair. You didn't even declare it, right? If you had, I don't think you would have probably been hired.
And then on the other side of that is saying, well, that's just showing the stigma. So what if I put down that as diabetic? Would that stop them from hiring me? Probably not.
Right.
But I'm just stating the world that we live in. That's the challenge.
Of, human rights and what is called trampling of it or otherwise, individual privacy and the like. But certainly, to your point, we can easily understand how, without having, safety steps or I'm trying to find the word that I'm searching for and I can't get it. But without having a safety net, a devisable criteria for entry. Now we're talking about border control, for example. You know, how do we know people that we are otherwise importing or introducing into our society? Because they're not just introducing them into companies. We are small enough to accept that this is also an introduction into our society.
Correct.
How do we manage what is in the overall best interest?
Well, I'd just like to say, I mean, obviously I don't want to drag you too much onto that, but I know the good little doctor did say, again, we're in that, especially now, we're in that sort of phase in the world where everybody's saying, listen, I'll deal with my problems, you deal with yours.
Safeguards
And again, from a permit perspective, it is supposed to be something that we're using to bring in expertise and qualifications that we don't have, not necessarily other problems. But I mean, I was really talking primarily about anyone that, you know, say locals that are in the workplace. You know, there should be something, I would imagine, that helps you to be able to deal with it. Maybe you can look and say, I had to tell this guy this like 6 times. Something's not right. And how do you approach that person? And how do you say, you know, I want you to go and get a checkup, but it's a different type of checkup.
Exactly. So that is where we're seeing gains. I mean, I don't want to come across and say like everything is bad. Even with the child and youth statistics, we're showing that they themselves are saying that they feel that the stigma is lessening, that they do feel that there are more people listening and hearing and concerned about mental health. So we have made change, but we still have a way to go. So in a work environment now, it's challenging. So we need to upscale and enhance our human resources type professionals with the options and the approaches that they have. They also have a challenge because they have a dual role. They are beholden in a sense to their employer, but they're supposed to be protecting the employee at the same time. But resources. So we need to enhance our resources for counseling, and we do have some free options here. We need to push the insurance companies a little bit more to provide and to have more equity with mental health care, and realize that especially if we focus, as we were saying, that most of these diagnoses and challenges occur at a young age, let us put some more effort on prevention, just like what the chief medical officer was talking about with other medical and chronic illnesses. We need to use the schools more as a source of assessing, evaluating our young people, identifying those that are coming from situations where they could be at risk for these adverse events, even if they're not manifesting it, so that we can make early interventions. I'm not saying to stigmatize our children. I'm not saying to put them all in a special class or to separate them from their friends, but to enhance. I heard a young person say something the other day that when they were in high school here, this is a guy probably about in his 30s or so, probably early 30s, that there was 1 hour a week of social skills class or something like that. And it's like a bit of a joke. That needs to be enhanced. That needs to be enhanced. We need, and when we say social skills, what do you mean? What are you talking about? How do you open a bank account? How do you talk to somebody? How do you say good morning, Mr. Ellio? How do you present? How do you dress yourself? How do you carry yourself? How do you deal with conflict? With conflict resolution. We need to be dealing with. And having discussions like this. We need to really look at our educational curriculum. We've been following the UK pattern, or we use these patterns. We're in a new world now where we need to look and say, maybe we need to put some real Caymanian history classes in there. We need to get some of our old people to come to school some days and just sit down in an auditorium and talk about how things were.
Well, you said something earlier which I think works to sort of destigmatize, you know, again, remove a little bit of the taboo, is when you showed us how broad it is, right? So again, the person that might simply not, I'm a little afraid getting on that flight, again, has some mental issues. But it's not anything that you and I would say, hey, this is an alarm bell, you know? And I think discussions and talking about it that way says, I could sit and say, Austin, we both have a little bit of a problem while we're dealing with it, right? So I think that kind of educational process, I think, would go a long way. But I definitely think it would be good as I'm reading all the stuff, even for example in the sexual harassment, I think there needs to be that sort of same educational process in the workplace when it comes to these issues.
And I agree.
If I could pick up on that point of education, and whilst this conversation began with us, of course, addressing the article, which again shared the startling statistics that are impacting Cayman's young people between the ages of 9 and 12 or 9 and 13. But now we've morphed, obviously, into the wider mental health discussion specific to the Poinciana Rehabilitation Facility, which is an adult mental health facility. I want to take us back to the youth survey that was first revealed as part of the Alex Panton Foundation. But I believe there's an educational component in my argument, and I just want to make the point. Also contained in that article was the quote as perhaps a contributing factor behind the increase in mental health illnesses in the Cayman Islands, particularly amongst young people. And I quote, more young people in the Cayman Islands identified their gender as non-binary. Now, non-binary, for the members of the public, because I had to look this up, I didn't automatically know this. Non-binary denotes relating to a gender identity that does not conform to the traditional binary beliefs about gender, which are male and female. Now, I'm going to say something at the risk of being accused of being xenophobic, but this whole notion of, gender identity, binary, trans, him, them, they, I view this personally as, an imported reality that we get from the Western world. We get it from the U.S., we get it from Europe, or whatnot. That's part of our imported society, and this is a learned behavior. Yeah. It's not something that, our young people automatically come up with this notion of gender identity by themselves. Somebody had to teach them this notion.
Yes.
It troubles me that in our small, close-knit community, we too are entertaining amongst our youngest generation this whole notion of gender identity where, again, a 9-year-old may see themselves as, trans male, trans female, but neither male nor female. Speak to us about that.
So, excellent point. The funnel of information that comes into the Cayman Islands, 90% of it, that's just my estimation, is external. We don't have a TV station.
Right.
I'm glad that the two of you are here. We need to have more talk shows. That's why I spoke about having the emphasis on education. We are swimming upstream as a small island nation. And I'll say further, even nations or countries that are maybe 3 or 4 times our size are swimming upstream. Hollywood is determining what we accept, what are the norms, what is male and female.
Shaping everyone's culture.
It's shaping. And as we spoke about technology, and I don't want to break down technology because it's a double-edged sword. There are a lot of positives with it.
Sure.
But it's a dangerous item. Yep. It's like a car.
Yes.
I love my car. It's great. It brought me over here. It's going to take me home and so on safely, but it's very dangerous also.
Yes.
Right? So I feel from a mental health standpoint that incorporating pride in our history and our culture as Caymanian, as Caribbean people, I'm going off a little bit, but I'm going to just throw something out. I don't want to forget it. We are the safest region in the world. And we should be talking about that. We should be proud of that. We should stand up. There's no war in the Caribbean. There are no military tankers and so on shooting or going in Grenada or St. Vincent or so on. We are the safest region in the world.
A lot to feel proud about.
Sure, absolutely. It's a very good point, valid point.
We have a very rich culture. We alone in Cayman have 130-something nationalities. Spread it out through the Caribbean. We speak every language. You can go to a French island. You can speak Spanish. We are a rich, diverse cultural region of the world. We don't see that.
Right.
We need to shout that and bring that up and make our young people know that and be proud of who they are. And I think you'll start to see certain changes in what is accepted from abroad and what we are proud of to say, no, this is who we are.
Yes.
All I can say is, wow, Dr. Lockhart, wow.
Yes. No, absolutely. Absolutely. 745-2626 is the number, or you can be a part of the conversation by adding your comments, viewpoints, or even questions by sending us a voice note on WhatsApp by dialing 928-2562, or simply sending us a traditional WhatsApp text message. We do have one such comment from the listening audience, and it was just basically to your last comment. Amen. What he is saying is so true and so important for us to be proud of, again, as a region. But I think I'll add to it. Whilst I don't think I'd argue with you that we are the safest region in the world, as you've also identified, and certainly by the whole non-binary conversation that our young people are having, we are not immune from the otherwise influences that have largely taken the world by storm.
Correct.
Now, and again, this is part of the wider fix, and maybe now is the time to be having these conversations that we're in an election cycle, certainly looking at healthcare and mental health as a part of that, overall big picture. But when we look at I think the Auditor General said in her last report that we are entering what could very well be a debt spiral, that we're spending more than we're bringing in. But leading the way in that high spend is healthcare.
Yeah.
Healthcare costs have increased by an average of 74% in the last 2 years, according to the Auditor General's report.
Yeah.
But there is a cost and effect. If we want to, implement policies for mental health, if we want to implement infrastructure for mental health, if we want to add wellness to the overall list of provisions as part of your annual checkup, all of these things carry with it a cost. So on the one hand, the increases in in healthcare costs may be relevant to the improvements that are being made in the local community, but at the same token, it may also have other connotations. So how do we decide what's good and what's bad?
So I feel that there is quite a bit of waste. And I don't want to trivialize the whole cost and say it's all down to waste, because it's not. But that's why I highlighted again that we have 54 beds out in East End. We're only using like 6 or 7 of them because we did not do the due diligence and the investment that we should have done 2 and 3 years ago, so that when this facility opened in December, we could actually bring in the people who really need to get in there right away, and cut down on sending people abroad.
Yes.
There are bills as high as several $1 million for one patient to go overseas for treatment. And I'm not talking about the more severe cases of like cardiac, specialized cardiac care and so on. I mean, just for substance abuse rehab, it's anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 US for 30 days. That adds up. And what I'm saying is that's money that could be spent here in our own facility, circulating in our own community, paying young people jobs to work in these facilities so that they'll have money to go to Foster's and other supermarkets or do whatever, and it'll circulate here. So I think if we would even start first with looking at who we're sending overseas and why, and matching that up with the services that we can augment to provide here, that will bring down a significant amount of costs. Sure. While at the same time working with the insurance companies to understand that there are ways of bringing greater equity in terms of physical ailments and mental health ailments by targeting early recognition and identification. So it may cost you several $1,000s to have the 6-year-old or the 8-year-old child assessed and see a counselor and so on, but you're preventing millions of dollars of care when that child is 14, 15, or 16. And once we start that, we will see and slow down on this just exorbitant healthcare burden that we are facing as a country.
Indeed. Well, we do have, it's 5:57 in studios. We got about a minute and a half left before we have to pause.
Well, just so that I can fully utilize that minute.
I'm sure you will.
I mean, I just want to commend you again for the comments you made about, what we can look at with the Caribbean. And again, it reminds me of the conversation that I was having with these two good gentlemen, because I think that we are products of our environment, and the simple little things that we're hearing, is those little words are planting seeds in our mind.
Words are powerful.
Correct. The Bible tells you death and life is in the power of the tongue, and it grows over a period of time. And I remember chatting with a young man and hearing him talk about, and this is, I think, I won't mention the specifics. I don't want to even remotely identify someone, but taking a very negative outlook. And I remember saying to him, you're talking as if your future's over. I said, I can tell you right now that here I am in my 50s and I'm very happy. And if I could probably do life over, I'd finish high school and get straight into construction, right? And I saw his eyes light up, Yeah. He was like, oh, so you're saying that construction? Yes. And it just gave him a completely different view. And you can imagine now if your parent or someone that you're looking up to is saying, oh, God, construction, come on, Yeah. So it's so important, the words that you're saying, and I just want to thank you for sharing that and echoing that.
Thank you.
It means a lot coming from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the phone lines are open at 745-2626. We do need a pause, take our final commercial break, check in with the BBC News. But when we come back, we will be wrapping up our conversation with the good doctor in-house, Dr. Mark Lockhart, right here exclusively on Straight.
Bobo FM. We're making Bobo FM bigger and better. We've got a brand new frequency with even more power. Retune your FM radio to 103.1 now. This is Bobo FM, the home of the BBC World Service, the most trusted news source in the world. Now in our new home of 103.1 FM. This is Bobo 103.1.
Welcome to our newsroom here in central London. We place ourselves here at a little desk right in the thick of things.
OS from the BBC.
We can catch the very latest news from our colleagues, not just in this enormous room, but also from our colleagues around the world.
I'm in the room where they're treating children.
This is a combat zone.
The situation after the typhoon is very complicated.
It was a very tense situation.
OS from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM. Bobo FM. We're making Bobo FM bigger and better. We've got a brand new frequency with even more power. Retune your FM radio to 103.1 now. This is Bobo FM, the home of the BBC World Service, the most trusted news source in the world. Now in our new home of 103.1 FM. This is Bobo 103.1.
For business, they say location, location, location. But really, there's no better location than right here, right now on your mobile phone or laptop. Buy and sell your pre-owned gear where the island is searching online. Buy and sell on ektrade.com. That's ektrade.com.
Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. Powered by Health Services Authority, the home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
I'm Stuart McIntosh with the BBC News. Hello. President Zelensky of Ukraine has tried to repair relations with Donald Trump, saying he's ready to work under his leadership to achieve a lasting peace with Russia. His comments came hours after the US president suspended military aid to Ukraine.
We must find the strength to move forward, to respect one another, just as we have always respected America, Europe and all our partners, and to do everything together to bring peace closer.
Mr. Zelensky expressed regret for last week's angry confrontation in the White House and said he was prepared to sign a minerals deal with Washington. Jeremy Bowen assesses Mr. Zelensky's message.
He used all the kind of requisite flattering language, though I thought the most interesting part of it all at the very end, he still talked about security agreements. And President Trump has said that this minerals mining agreement, the presence of American investment, is all the security guarantee you might ever need. There seems to be this idea that these valiant American miners will turn into defenders, but in fact, they're probably going to be Ukrainian miners anyway.
President Zelensky's comments have been welcomed by Ukraine's leading European allies. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer commended what he called his steadfast commitment to securing peace. President Macron of France praised his willingness to re-engage with Donald Trump. Germany's likely next chancellor says his incoming coalition has proposed an unprecedented package of hundreds of billions of dollars in extra spending on defence and infrastructure. Friedrich Merz said the two parties would bring proposals to Parliament next week to exempt increased defence spending from Germany's constitutional limit on government debt. Mr. Merz said the threats to freedom and peace in Europe meant defence must be enhanced. Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has fiercely condemned Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian imports, saying this was a very dumb thing to do, and accusing the US president of seeking to collapse Canada's economy in order to annex it.
The excuse that he's giving for these tariffs today of fentanyl is completely bogus, completely unjustified, completely false. So we actually have to fold back on the one thing he has said repeatedly, that what he wants is to see a total collapse of the Canadian economy, because that'll make it easier to annex us, is the second half of his thought. Now, first of all, that's never going to happen. We will never be the 51st state.
Canada has responded with matching tariffs. 3 provinces have banned the sale of American alcohol. At least 12 civilians, including children, have been killed in a militant attack in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in northwest Pakistan. 30 others were injured. Police said suicide bombers rammed 2 cars laden with explosives into the military compound. BBC News. Arab leaders have approved an Egyptian plan to counter President Trump's suggestion of taking over the Gaza Strip and evicting its Palestinian inhabitants. Closing a Cairo summit on Gaza's reconstruction, Egypt's President Sisi said the plan would ensure Palestinians remained on their land. With more, here's Elise Doucette.
It avoids the issue of what role, if any, Hamas would play. They make it clear they don't want Hamas to play a role, but they don't spell that out. And Hamas has made it clear that while it understands it won't be involved in running Gaza, disarming is a red line. Other issues, they've called for a UN Security Council plan to deploy international peacekeepers. So this plan goes a long way to saying the Arab world, working with its international partners, because this will cost a whopping $53 billion at least, they can find a way forward.
Syria's interim president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, has called on regional and international leaders to take decisive action against Israeli attacks on his country. Mr. Sharaa reaffirmed Syria's commitment to a 1974 disengagement agreement and accused Israel of continuously violating it. He urged the international community to pressurize Israel to withdraw from the buffer zone it's taken in southern Syria. A Hong Kong-based firm that operates 2 ports near the Panama Canal says it's decided to sell them to a US-led consortium. The ports, Balboa and Cristobal, are at the canal's Pacific and Atlantic entrances. Since returning to office, Donald Trump has threatened to seize control of the critical trade route after claiming without evidence that China controlled it. The Taliban authorities in Afghanistan say they've seized over 6 tons of opium in a northern region bordering Tajikistan. A police spokesman said it was the single biggest such haul since the Taliban took power. BBC News.
The views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Kim and Crosstalk with your host, Austin Harris, and myself, Ellio Solomon. It is Straight Talk here on Bobo. The number to call here in the studio is 745-2626, 745-2626, and of course, we're streaming out on 103.1, and we have the pleasure to have Dr. Lockhart here in the studio. number one psychiatrist, I would say, and definitely perhaps the longest-serving one, I think.
Yes.
And has done a lot, both private and public sector. And we're having a total awesome discussion. But unfortunately, as they say, all good things come to an end.
Well, just before we come to that end, and again, to bring us back full circle, at 6:07 is the time in studios. Again, Dr. Lockhart, we cannot thank you enough for being our guest to help us understand this troubling issue of youth mental illness and the rise of which in the Cayman Islands. We've talked about a myriad of subjects relating to this issue of mental illness in the Cayman Islands. But I want to bring it back home specifically to the parents. You know, again, 15% of our young people have had suicidal thoughts. Almost 8% have actually tried to take their own lives. Another, percentage have actually, caused themselves self-harm. And our statistics of mental health amongst young people is higher than the global average. All reasons that, we should take this issue very, very seriously. But at the first point of contact, I want to ask again ways in which parents, again, guidance to parents who may be listening here today, particularly parents of young people, as to how they can identify, how they can talk to their children. In my research and preparing for our discussion here this evening, I stumbled on two things. The 3 C's of suicide prevention and the 3 R's of suicide prevention. The 3 C's stand for connection, collaboration, and choice. The 3 R's stand for recognize, respond, and refer. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about each of these areas as a guidepost for parents when talking to their children.
So each of these, those approaches, and there are a few others, fall under that umbrella of what we were talking about earlier with listening to your child and listening with that third ear, being very observant as to what's going on. And learning that we have to negotiate. We have to be able, and that's where that C of collaborate with them. That let's see, what can we do to make you feel better? How can we change what you're going through and what you're experiencing? I hear you. I understand what you're going. I'm not going to deny or demean or devalue what they're saying. And we have to be careful also with our facial response and not just what we say. I've had parents that, for example, that said, come on, we don't, we are whatever our last name may be. We don't hurt ourselves and so on. We don't this and that. You're shutting down an avenue right there of information. So any change from the norm is something that needs to be questioned, listened to, observed, reach out for help. There is help available. We do have now the Alex's Place at HSA, which is another wonderful result of collaborative work. That's something else we didn't touch on, which I feel is another area to manage our healthcare costs, is that we need to bring the private sector in. The days of us being the colonial system of just the government does everything and you have a chief officer or, what was the name before it that we used to call the chief officer?
Permanent secretary.
Permanent secretary, and everything just comes from government and so on. It's not sustainable.
Right.
We need to figure out ways of partnership with the private sector. The HSA has done that, and I hail Ms. Lizette for her work that she's done because she reached out to the Mental Health Commission years ago. We worked as a team with the Mental Health Commission and others with the Alex Panton Foundation to locate a facility at the hospital. They provided some of the funds. Government worked well, the ministry with the private sector to bring that. So anyway, those are options for parents to reach out. It's a very accepting environment. We have professionals there. So it's very important not to use denial or to avoid.
Yes, indeed. And I don't mind doing this. We tend to, try to walk that fine line between obviously community interest and commercial interest. But You know, you're in the private sector as you are in the public sector. For those persons listening, and obviously perhaps getting to know you for the first time, or perhaps may have identified certain, warning signs in their young people just on the basis of this discussion and want to have a more personal follow-up with you, would you be, willing to share your professional contact details for those members of the audience?
Certainly. So, again, we have a wonderful cadre of psychiatrists, psychologists, and mental health professionals on island. We really do have, and that's another reason why I was advocating so firmly for the new government that comes in, for us really to sit down with the hospitals, sit down with stakeholders to look at the resources we do have on island, because we can put a better balance and make it more accessible to those that need it.
Yes.
But I work in both facilities, so I can be reached either at the Health Services Authority, and the number there is 244-2650 for the outpatient department. I work primarily on the inpatient unit, though, so that's if somebody's actually hospitalized, I'm there, and I also do on-calls and emergency type care. And I also work several days a week at BHAC, or Behavioral Health Associates Cayman, and that number is 746-0066. And I'm always willing to give advice or to direct people in the right direction. I'm not the type of practitioner that's just looking for another patient or so on. This is my community. This is my home. I don't plan on going anywhere else. Right. I'm proud of this little place. I hold my head high when I fly out of the Cayman Islands and I say I'm from the Cayman Islands. So I want to do everything possible.
Love hearing that.
To make sure that this little place, our flag flies high.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah.
I asked just to repeat, certainly you provided us with a private number, but you had also the 244 number for the public health side, but I didn't get the other 4 digits.
Right, so it's 244-2650.
2650.
Or 244-2827. And they can easily leave a message for me or so on, and or leave their name and
244-2650 or 244-2827.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Just want to make sure I have that so that when you're gone and we get that, inevitable phone call saying, who do I contact?
Call or so on, they can always call, and I would be more than happy to give them some direction or help.
Fantastic. Ellio, do you have any further questions for the good doctor?
Well, I really want to get him to reiterate some of the stuff that we were chatting a little bit about during the break. And I want to share one of my experiences, and I think well, first of all, I have to commend you. Not only you're a great doctor, you're a great speaker too. But I just want to share one of my
incredible bedside manner.
Yeah, I want to share one of my experiences, and it just kind of coincides with what you were chatting about during the break. And I really want you to just deliver that message the way I know that you can. But I've said this before on radio, but for those who haven't heard it, I remember when I first started working in computer services, there I was a young tech, just probably making $1,000 a month. Whoopee, lots of money. And then, at the time, I had one of these person that came down and was doing some networking with us. He said, "Hey, Ellio, bring me a pair of snips," right? And I'm like all embarrassed. I didn't have the snips. And I could have made lots of excuses and said, hey, government didn't really provide us with some of these tools. And there was been a lot of merit to that. And I'm sure he didn't physically touch me, but he was so strong and assertive with the way of getting me out of there to speak to me privately by the elevator that it actually felt like he had dragged me out there. And I remember him standing there and saying, Ellio, you have a lot of potential. I can see you running this place, but you really got to get your SHIT stuff together. And I wanted to defend myself, but the message, I think, was so truthful. And he had given me such a wonderful vision of what I could have been that I couldn't say anything. And I went out and said, you know what, I remember spending like $525. I know the almost exact price for a brand new Jensen toolkit. And the rest was history. Before you know it, I was there running the technical department. And you were delivering that sort of message during our break. Again, for parents, for community leaders, it doesn't matter how putting that positive message. So I'll leave it for you to do.
Right. So there is some fascinating work, and this is something that anyone can look up at Stanford University. If I can remember, I think one of the psychologists, her last name is Cohen. But if you Google and look it up, you'll see. But part of their work is about small or immediate interventions that adults can make, parents and adults can make in young people's lives that can be significant and impactful. Because there's a belief, again, especially when we're talking about mental health or behavioral concerns, that it has to be a therapist, it's going to be long, ongoing, you have to make appointments, what can we do as parents, and so on. And these studies were really highlighting that brief, positive, motivating encounters can be very powerful and long-lasting. And they found that once you apply that approach in a positive way, you want to talk to the young person about the expectations that you have for them. I know, Johnny, that you can do it. I view you as a leader. I view you as another doctor or a lawyer or an accountant or premier of the Cayman Islands. You have that potential, and that's what I'd like to see you doing. Rather than, why can't you do this and that? How come you're not doing this and that? Why can't you this and that? How come such and such is doing this and you can't? When you start from the negative, they're already blocking it out.
Right.
Part of the proof of this study, or some of the information they use, they said, think back. Most of us as human beings can think back to a time in our lives when there was a coach, a teacher, a neighbor, somebody we looked up to that said, come here, young man, you know something, what you did or this, or come here, young lady, this and that. You know what? You're going to really go places or so. And it changes your life. You don't forget that. And the opposite is the case, where we also know of cases, or many of us say, you know what, when I was in the 4th grade or this, I was talking in class and a teacher said, shut up, you're not going to be anything, or you're going to be this, or you're going to, and many times we never forget those type of statements. And it can go one or two ways. It can either make you say, you know what, I'm going to prove them wrong, or it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's it.
So one other tip for parents is set the expectations. Aim for the moon or aim for the stars. And if you miss the stars, you land on the moon.
Right. That's right. Indeed.
Yeah, again, I just want to say, you know, the more I hear, the more I learn. I love the Bible. It just gives me the truth. And again, the scriptures say death and life is in the power of the tongue.
That's
right.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Dr. Lockhart, I just want to thank you so much for coming in the studio.
Thank you both.
I think
for having me.
my colleague captured it, that, you know, sometimes you can get a guest that you got to be pulling teeth, but that's definitely not the case with you. A wealth of knowledge and knowing just how to articulately and eloquently deliver it. Thank you very much for what you're doing for the country as well, for all of us.
Thank you very much.
And you have said a lot, but certainly an opportunity for some closing final remarks if you have any to share.
Again, just to say that, you know, mental health and mental illness is not an afterthought. As I said, especially when it applies to our young people. It is the foundation of their being. It is what will set them for their future course. And it is what will lead to us continuing to have this beautiful country and for generations to be able to enjoy and to live and to flourish. Absolutely. So a lot needs to be done. Again, I don't want to say that we haven't done. We have done a lot, but remember, we're playing catch up. We are one of the fastest growing little countries in the world in terms of just where our population was. In 1970, we were 12,000 people total. And here we are, like 50 years later or something, and how many times?
Working close to 100,000 now. Yeah.
Somebody might say in a larger jurisdiction, 100,000 is not a lot. But when you're coming from a small place, it's a pretty significant growth.
In a very short period of time.
Yeah. So we need to do a bit more. We have the resources. We have the skills. It's not all about spending money. But we need to join together, not just government, but the private sector, those that are willing. There are a lot of NPOs that are very prominent on the island and willing to participate. So we need to have that openness moving forward. We're in a different world now.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better. And again, I'm thoroughly grateful for for this opportunity that we've been afforded today. But more importantly, I think the listening audience are the benefactors of today's conversation.
And I'll just highlight again how he has done a wonderful job. He continues to do a wonderful job for the country, and proof of that is how responsive you were coming in here. I mean, we just had this discussion. We had absolutely no plans, and right away just giving you a call, and here you are in the studio to discuss this. We really, really appreciate it.
No, we certainly do. We certainly do. It is 6:22 in studios, giving us just over 7 minutes, Ellio.
For you and I to banter,
For
right?
you and I to banter a little bit. Certainly, again, we want to thank our guest, Dr. Lockhart. And certainly, thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother. God bless you. God bless you.
Bless you both. And thank you.
It's been a wonderful show, an eye-opening show, and as alarming and as concerning and as scary as those statistics are, I feel much more comforted, if you will, that we have the right professionals where we need them. Certainly, the guidance that was provided today in terms of parents, how do you talk to your kids?
And more importantly, he said how we listen too.
How we absolutely.
Third ear.
Right? Absolutely, that's.
I learned something.
My father used to say, that's why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah.
And you got to listen twice as much as you talk.
There you go.
Thank you again, Dr. Lockhart. And to get out, just hit the button on the main door as you head outside. All right. Awesome. If not, we'll be there in 5 minutes to make sure, okay? Yeah. Thanks again. Saying goodbye to our guest, Dr. Mark Lockhart, with about 5 minutes left remaining in today's program. 745-2626 is the number. We never really talked about it, but tomorrow's a public holiday.
Want me to come over there and tap you in the back or something?
Well, I need to finish this.
You need some water?
I can get it. I've got some over here. Well, coffee anyway.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Tomorrow's a public holiday, but I kind of did, I was thinking about this last night, saying that I kind of answered for both Ellio and myself. That, I declared that we were coming to work tomorrow, but I didn't ask you whether you want to come to work tomorrow.
Well, I don't know. I mean, they got your name up here first,
So they say, worst case scenario, I can come to work and you can.
Somebody's probably thinking, why did Austin go? Austin and Ellio. Why wasn't Ellio and Austin? Who flipped the coin here? I guess I lost on that one.
Well, I think where that came down, it was just, sort of alphabetically.
It was
you can.
I kind of did. I agree with it completely with just the A&E, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks great with our logo. I mean, I really, of all the things of our show, I like our personal logo, the artwork.
I thought it was like an age before beauty cut it.
Well, it could very well be. It could very well be. You were definitely the beauty side of this conversation. But but just to say, I mean, I'm glad you raised it. Whilst somebody's always got to have a name first or a second. We don't have those sort of hierarchy issues.
Yeah, we don't worry about that.
We've never had those hierarchy issues. And,
definitely.
Whilst the sign may say Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio when we do our social media promotion, or for those of you who are lucky enough to see our marketing promotional packages, it's Ellio and Austin.
Yeah, it doesn't
so
matter.
it really matters not whose name is on the title, but more importantly, that both names are on the door.
That's it. We're together again.
The host names really pale in comparison to the title of the show, which is Straight Talk. That's what we want. That's what we're here for. We're gonna. And again, I have to thank our guest. He didn't pull any punches with the conversation today.
No,
he gave it to us as our favorite country singer would say, a nice dose of the cold hard truth.
The cold hard truth.
In many respects, George Jones.
You don't know who I am, but I know all about you.
See, there you go. If you come to the Ag Show tomorrow,
I've come to talk to you tonight about the things I've seen you do.
See, there you go.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we can sing us a country song.
Well, we used to have some fun at that.
We used to have some fun with that. You come down to the Ag Show tomorrow, you'll see and hear some more country to go with it. Speaking of the Ag Show, just again, some community announcements as we started out this evening. The East-West Arterial from Hearst Road to Agricola Drive will open tomorrow, specifically to cater to those persons obviously heading to the Agricultural Pavilion and want to drive themselves from home all the way to the location. Whilst there will be shuttle services available.
There's somebody sitting saying, where exactly is this Hearst Road?
Yeah.
That's the one that runs between along ICCI all the way to the countryside, right?
That's right. That's right. Next to the Countryside Shopping Center. That's Hearst Road. And again, if you're taking the East-West Arterial from its origin point as you cross and come off of the Christy Tomlinson roundabout, and you go straight as opposed to turning right and going along Shamrock Road, Again, you'll just continue straight along that road till you get to Hearst Road, cross the street, and continue along. So that road will be open tomorrow for those persons attending the agricultural show. Just a forewarning that the road is still an active construction zone. So we've got a temporary road service down. We got chip and spray as opposed to asphalt. So if your car is clean and you don't want to get it dirty, well, maybe you don't want to go to the agricultural show because dust will reign supreme at the agricultural show, not just on the roadways, but when you get there. Otherwise, certainly if you want to avoid the traffic, they will be doing shuttle services. You can just go online to the government website and check it out. But with 1:20 remaining, some closing comments of your own.
I only want to say that it's always fun being here, and it's almost 4 weeks for us, right?
Yeah, almost.
So we have to plan something exciting. I do want to say and share with the listening audience. Let me see if I can get this out really quietly. I want to know. I got a little surprise in here, Austin. Jeez. Listen.
He went out and got some sound effects, folks.
So this might be one of those things like time is up, time up.
Right.
It could be school is in.
Yes.
Or it could be school is out. Or just quiet down. It could be lunch break. It could be a myriad of different things, but you will be hearing the bell.
And you have another one.
I got another one. Hold on.
Having somebody lick shot in studios, either a caller or...
We need to get one of those.
Yeah, you know.
So anyway, it's been great, and of course, I just want to again thank Dr. Lockhart. It was a wonderful discussion, and especially coming in here on some arguably short notice. We greatly appreciate it.
Indeed.
And we're going to have a lot to chat about. 59 candidates. We made all the corrections. Isn't it back to 58? That one's dropped out?
Yeah, with one drop out, we're back to 58.
So it was like we made an error, but in fact we didn't. We thought we were wrong,
but
only when we
right.
thought we were wrong, because we ended up being right.
That's all the time we have for today, but join us tomorrow at 4:30 here on Bobo FM.
The BBC on Bobo.